Tũrĩa Kenya na nĩ wega twĩre andũ ũrĩa thirikari ĩthondeketwo nĩ atĩ thirikari ĩrĩ oho. Thirikari ĩwakaga in perpetuation ũrĩa ũgũka agũka oerere hau. Thirikari onagĩkorwo gũtirĩ mũndũ tũkuona ũroerera in the next 60 days. Honge ciothe no ciraruta wĩra nĩkĩo hotire kuma gwakwa ndoka haha Iloro tondũ kwĩna ũgitĩri, kwĩna ũrangĩri. Nikio turahota kumemerekia discourse ya thaa ici tondu ruhonge ruria rurugameire maundu macio no ruratigira maundu macio koguo tutikagie na guoya na gutigakorwo na ngui ikwagagia biashara cia andu o Itua Rĩa Igoti andu ma maintain peace na mamenye maundu no maguthii na mbere na gia bata ni ati he bururi to wakue na wiendi waku na urorere muno kirongoria nginya njiaro ciaku.
Haya mundu ajira mirilinko nigeithika muno ndona ni urerorera mundu gutoi cigetongoria ranjira atiriri ati Njoroge ni muracira wega muno tanjuria mutaramu hihi gavana aria mari ho mbere miaka 5 ri na maracokio ringi ni meguthie miaka 5 kiwatho kana ni mekururira ringi no mathie miaka 10 maigate ni kirumaniririo
uria watho ugite ati wila itela 10 ria gutongoria
itena ria miaka 10
miaka 10 sorry
ni kumani tonginya rumanirire
tonginya rumani orogitongoria ici talo coke goka thutha wa miaka 20 the law construes lwa thala miaka yaku 10 otherwise kugikola la kune guko kwela gavala strong ona no ihotithie ucoke rĩngĩ ukimenya ni ugathala ingi miaka 5 koguo watho yugaga mundu umwe athane miaka 10 koguo ria maracoka na ngũcio ngire twagwetete aria maracoka tu gavala
sauta gavana Joshua Irungu wa kuria Laikipia aracoka arikia thie
ngũcio le twa classify te hindu ingi twari haha Inoro makehitithio tukiuga kwila gavala ero 26 kwila aria marari gitini maracoka 11 riu ni marongerekire eri aya 23 koguo ni 28 na kwila gavala aria mari ho kafere maracokire anana koguo aya anana ni guthi marathi marikitie wira wao
ha no agethio ni mundu urathurirwo ta MCA wa kuria kundu gitagwo Konyo ward etagwo kameri wa kia mabara
ndageithika muno
ya njira ni riu areita MCA elect
thank you
congratulations Dr. Gesho ni mwe wale marendaga Gesho wa Boini mwe wale marendaga giturwa kia MCA kuria gitagwo wa Njohi na kuria ceketi na igana no anjira atiriri ni arakena ni ugima no gimarua a Kenya hari okinyete ati kuria andu meciragia hi tondu Itua ni riguthiona kana ni gwatangathwona ati buri wa Kenya ni kugia haro na gutindu tocio wahandikire
leo tureta the majesty of our democratic system unene na ugima wa democracy itu
haya geithika wakiri na ni murathomithia wega muno uni Irungu wa haitekia kuria kuritagwo na nyuki ni marathoma na makakena na going forward dronire riu na gitikia MCA rigukona hinya mwingi muno ritariri kuringana uria riu kuronania
MCA ena hinya muno tondu no wega tukagweta ta county ya Nairobi etumagirwo bilioni 19 county iria ingi roko tutikina mathabu macio hihi bilioni 3 bilioni 5 Njoroge ugitara bilioni 6 hari miaka 5 yo ni bilioni 30 koguo no mwaka bilioni 30 gavana uraikarire miaka 10 arari na bilioni 60 koguo no mwaka bilioni icio 30 onako no marari harutia wira no mwaka reflect ikirongoreria maundu maria 14 tugwetire under schedule 4 ya gatiba part 2 koguo no mwaka kuhotithia mbeca icio kuhuthirwo wega at the front ya bare oni mundu gwetwo member of the county assembly tondu wa his the constitutional law oversight representation na registration ati mawatho ma kuhotithia manifesto ya Njoroge ya rereirie andu maguthondekwo ni MCA bill ati mbeca cikuhuthirwo ni Njoroge MCA ucio no mwaka cio ofitithia la kurora mathabu ma executive ithabu riri gikombe kiragurwo ciringi 1,000 ni MCA gukaya la gutetera mwingi koguo uga MCA ni giti very powerful na ya ni andu mena constitutional laws koguo makiorora ku matura-ini ngwiciria ni makuhota guthomithio na mero mena mahinya maingĩ muno ma gigatiba guthondeka watho wa county yo wa Machani wa Iria kurora bilioni icio 6 cirathie la mbere atia lo ni mundu hi ararika professional kala arari ogwo koguo ni mundu wina hinya muno nao mekuwe mena hinya ucio na mahuthire hinya ucio mahetwo ni gatiba kurora na kurangira indo cia muingi
mwirore mbica icio rona cie mwena waku wa muthongari icio rona njiro mirao ni mirao ya uria uratwarite cira gutetia cira igoti-ini Raila Amolo Odinga icio ni ngari ciake cikiuma muciĩ gwake Karen cierekeire barabara-inĩ kana cierekeire igoti-ini riu ria Supreme icio ni mbica cia imwe kwa imwe rona uria urakiona ati kana urathi na mbere na gweterera riu twatigia ndagika 30 tu na kituge ndagika 30 tu nigetha itua riri ria Supreme rikorwo rikirekererio na tukorwo tukimenya bururi ukuya mwerekera uriku wakiri ni gutaririe kwina maundu meri hihi turakorwo tugitanya muthenya wa umuthi wa mbere ni ati igoti no riuge president elect kana president muthure athie na mbere na kwihitithio wakeri no matenirie githurano kiu na githurano kingi kia o president macio ni matua meri maria tugitanya muthenya wa umuthi
matua maya turama gayanĩtie na maita meri the probables and the possibility
kwe probables na possibilities
probables umenye cira uyu wa igoti riri ti cira ta wa criminal you have to prove your case beyond reasonable doubt. It's a balance of probabilities. The probable ni maria me under article 140 ya gatiba gaitu. The possibility lere under section 80 subsection 4 ya election act la gutariria. The probable ya tiriri githurano no gitwike upheld kia mundu gwitwo William Ruto president elect na mauge matiari na mahita no mauge he mahitia marari na maheane advisory in terms of conduct na mitugo na merutire wira ya commission ona ni commission gayo kalu koguo ni turetera hihi igoti riri they will call into order commission ya ABC lori makiuria maciuria maingi no makiuga thithio ona turuta wira twi hamwe but we have a team leader so they can upheld metikalia na oria mekire but they call them into order mero ni mwagiro ku behave go the other probably ni ati no mateanirie na muge githurano gigitia fuatire kala kiari la illegality la irregularities mateanirie umenya hau he maundu meri no metie rerun which is equal to a fresh election area law ikoro igitegemea the constitutional caveat ya 50% plus one vote under article under article 138 for ya gatiba no metie githurano kia runoff nikurikala okia omtata one of the petition aratetagia numbers koguo no mauge githurano gikiri technology yari njega la icio ya number twagitia kinya 50% plus one so we ask for a runoff ndire la constitutional caveat Njoroge wanyita ithatu ni nyite igiri welwe wahota ni tore kwari 2007 koguo macio ni maundu meri the possibility rĩrĩa turaugaga hihi ihoya rĩetĩtio nĩ petition la kura citarwo rĩngĩ na nĩrĩrwo arĩ muhotani leo rĩeheririo rĩrĩa twetire status conference tondũ gũtiaila gũtarwo gwa kura koguo section 80 subsection 4 it's no longer applicable so the possibility is no longer there so we are dealing with the probables or the probabilities
na ni wega muno wakiri andu no marathi na mbere na gukena ni uria rathi na mbere na gutariria na ndenda tuthie kuria mwena wa igoti ria Milimani kuria gikaro gia Supreme kiri na murikio mohoro gwitwo wa Weru wa Nyambura ni njui ali standby wa Weru wa Nyambura ni njui twatige ndagika 27 twatara kuma ndagika 90 tugukita nae tutigitia kwi mathaa meri na twatige ndagika kindu 30 iri na kindu tondu ni thaa 5 na ndagika 33 ndenda utwire hihi mundu gwitwo wa Weru wa Nyambura niki kingi kigeni wonete gia cenjia ku igoti-ini
Thengi muno Njoroge wa Githĩnji maundu mothe riu maronania ndagika icio 27 watariria maundu mothe megukorwo marĩirwo tondu mawakiri a miene rĩrarehete cira gũkũ igoti-inĩ arĩa marathitanganĩte na arĩa maratetagira ũhotani wa President Muthure Ndagĩtarĩ William Ruto na makinya marĩa matacukirwo nĩ IEBC othe nĩ mambĩrĩirie gũkinya gĩikaro-inĩ gĩkĩ nĩ tuona amwe a ahũranĩri a gĩturwa gĩa president ũrĩa ũrarũgama na kĩama kĩa Roots George Wajakoya nĩ arĩkia gũkinya gĩikaro-inĩ gĩkĩ ona gũtuĩka igoti-inĩ rĩa mũgiririe gũkorwo akĩnyita itemi cira-inĩ ũyũ nĩ tuona agĩkinyia gĩikaro-inĩ gĩkĩ Raila Odinga ũrĩa ũrarũgamaga na ngwatanĩro ya Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance barabara onake erekeire cikaro-inĩ cia mĩaraho ya ũmũthĩ nĩguo tuone acirithania othe mũgwanja makĩambĩrĩria kũrekereria itua rĩao igũrũ rĩa mateta ma gĩthurano kĩa mwaka wa 2022 Gathoni Wanjihia nĩ andũ arĩkũ angĩ abata mĩhang'o-inĩ ĩno marĩkĩtie gũkinya
Thengi muno wa Weru wa Nyambura na mawakiri marathie na mbere na gukinya toguo watariria ni tuonete mundu tariu tukiingira haha ni tuona wakiri wa William Ruto ugwitwo Fred Gatiani arikia gukinya undumwe na andu angi aria tungiuga marenda muno kana itua riria rigutuo muthenya wa umuthi rigie mwerekera uria bururi ugukorwo ugithie naguo ni rigukorwo kana ni ria bata kuri ona angikorwo tia guku bururi-ini na ni tuona maabitha kuma urumwe wa mabũrũri ma Europe ona ni marikia gukinya na neta kuga ati kumanagia na riu acio marikia kuingira aria tugukorwo tugieterera ni acirithania acio mugwanja nigetha moke makorwo makirikia gutua kana moke makorwo makirekereria itua riria megukorwo nario miaraho ya umuthi
na ngwiciria no tutaririe muthikiriria na mwiroreri wa Inoro TV ati acirithania acio othe mugwanja marari kuria kawa-ini wi mwena wa Kiambu na ni marikitie gukinya cikaro-ini cia igoti ria Milimani kuria igoti ria ihinda ria igoti gikaro kia ihinda kia igoti Itũgĩru kiambikitwo na makinyite guku ni ndagika cia muthia onao mareka cia gwikira nguo ciao cia wira nigetha tukorwo tukiona onao makiingira gikaro-ini gigi kurekereria itua ria uguo ni kuga ati maundu mothe ni marirwo gutigirira kiraniro kiao gia kwambiriria mihango ya kurekereria itua thaa thita cia miaraho ni gigukinyanirio na njira igwete mawakiri no ndirona magithie na mbere na gwikinyia acio ni wakiri aria maratindikaga mwena wa Raila Odinga irari mbutu ngima andu aingi maronaga o aria maraheagwo kanya ga kwaria no aria marari na kuria thutha gutiririra o mwahuri urarehete cira igoti-ini riri urari undu irari timu imwe nene muno na ngwiciria acio rona magithie na mbere na gwikinyia no amwe aria marari thutha kuria thutha na ni tuonete aria marari haria mbere onao marikitie gukinya
na igoti nire ona hindi ria riaheanaga mawatho megie kana hindi ria igoti riaheanaga mawatho megie uria cikaro ici cigukorwo igitabanio ni riatariirie ati ni riaheana rumu ingi kana ni riaheana giikaro kingi kia mawakiri aria megukorwo magithikiriria kana magiteithiriria acio aria marehagwo kana aria mare main aria mathikagiriria cira uyu na haha nja wa cikaro ici toria Kareithi wa Julius Kareithi gutariirie ugiteri wambatirio na gikiro kinene na gukinya haha mundu gutire ati mundu ungikorwo ati ndahetukitio arakorwo akigira cikaro-ini ici na ririkana ona ruhonge rwa borithi ni ruratariirie ati hari barabara igukorwo ikihingwo kuringana na maundu maria megukorwo magithie guku thiini wa cikaro ici cia Supreme Court
na in fact ugitiri uguo roiga ugacirithitio na njira nene o ati nginya he mawakiri turona magikinya guku na maguru uguo ni kuga ati ngari ciao cigitwo kundu kuraya muno maabitha a borithi makoretwo mambikite migiko barabara-ini iria ciothe cingiumiriria mundu guku Milimani na ugitiri ugacirithitio ni mutukanio wa maabitha othe a borithi ni turona maabitha a borithi a kawaida aria tumenyerete a nguo cia rangi wa blue ni turona maabitha a ruhonge rwa GSU ni turona maabitha a ruhonge rwa wathani maabitha a ruhonge rwa GSU guku matongoretio ni commandant wao uguo ni kuga ati ugitiri ni wa gikiro kia iguru muno gutigirira ukiona ukigacirithio ni muabitha wa gikiro kiu ni kuonania uritu uria mihango ya umuthi ikirirwo no turona maabitha aria makoragwo na funda kaingi wira wao ukoragwo uri wa gukorwo makigiririria ikundi cia andu citikagerie kuingirira ringi haria maragitira na uguo ni kuga ati tondu umuthi gutire na andu ni maretikirire gwathikira watho uria uraturwo ni maabitha a borithi muthenya wa ira wa kumagiria gukorwo magikuhiriria cikaro cia bunge tondu matire ho ni kuga ati muthenya wa umuthi maabitha aria makoragwo makihuthira barathi gukorwo makigiririria muingi mirurungano-ini matire na wira munene muthenya wa umuthi noguo ni kuga makamba kuoya ihinda ria kuhumuka riria ritokaga kaingi riria me mihango-ini teno no maabitha a GSU migiko mahuthirite iria ya marori maria mao kirori gikambikwo barabara gatagati gikahingurwo gikahinga barabara na miena yothe na turona mutaratara uyu ugathikitwo kundu guothe na kwi kuria nginya mambikite nyambo gutigirira ati gutire mundu utagiriire gukorwo ari guku cikaro-ini cia igoti riri Itũgĩru gwetikiria gukorwo agikinya guku
na waweru no tuthie na mbere na kuririkania mwiroreri wa Inoro TV imwe cia ciuria iria majaji megukorwo magioka kugeria gucokia kana iria cirakorirwo cikiarira muthingi wa cira uria warehirwo ni Raila Odinga udumwe na Martha Karua na undu umwe uria uraona hindi iria mawakiri marakoragwo magitemania cira wao urarehire urugari muno ni uhoro wigie gutumwo kwa maimirira kugerera njira ya mitambo kuma kuria ceceni-ini ya gwikiria kura area ya thibio o nginyagia ceceni nene ya utari wa kura ya Bomas. Na ririkana ni turonire mawakiri a Raila Odinga makigeria kuonia igoti haha niho kura citu hihi cia thogeirwo na haha niho kuringana na uria marakoragwo makiuga kura ciarutirwo kuma kuri mundu umwe gikabu kia mundu umwe na cigeikio gikabu-ini kia mundu uria ungi koguo ni kiuria kia technology ria irahuthirwo ni IBC area matua mana hau kabere mamiathire ati no nginyagia ikorwo ikihuthira mitambo irateithiriria gukinyaniria githurano kia mana waragania na githurano mundu wothe angukorwo ana kiuria no makorwo makionania kana mena uhoti wa gukorwo makionania kana gutariria ikinya gwa ikinya twambiriirie haha kana maimirira maikirio haha mangigatumwo gukinya kuria Bomas gwathire o no na koguo ona ciuria cia ukinyaniru wa fomu iria cire mutambo-ini wa IBC form cia 34A no kiuria mawakiria kana majajia tugukorwo tukiona makigeria gucokia kana kuringana na wira uria uratemanirio ri ni maronire ni mafomu icio ni cia thogetwo ni maronire ni imwe cia fomu iria cikiritwo mitambo-ini yo ya IBC ni ciambaga kugererwo ni andu angi wakamwira cicenjeirio maimirira cigacoka gukorwo igitumwo kuria Bomas kuria maimirira mothe managirirwo.
Kiuria kia mitambo ni gia bata tondu ithurano-ini cia bururi wa Kenya gicokaga o thutha mbere ya ithurano cia mwaka wa 2017. Mbere yo ithurano cia bururi wa Kenya ciakoragwo ciri cia mutaratara uria githungu wetagwo manyo ugathie ugaikia kura cigatarwo moimirira makarehwo Nairobi ni uria wa manirira no thutha wa ngwe cia mwaka wa 2007 mucirithania wa kuma bururi-ini wa South Africa wetagwo Johan Kriegler oka athuthuria kihumo kia ngwe cia bururi wa Kenya augire githurano gia bururi githurano toria tugitabanagia nikiagire gukorwo gikihimbiria utaramu na mitambo marungo-ini matiganite na akiendekithia akiruta riendekithia riu commission ya IEBC hindi yo igitongorwo ni Isaac Hassan ni yetikirire gukorwo ikigeria kuhimbiria mitambo ona gutuika ti andu ingi maiganire na uria yarutire wira githurano-ini kia mwaka wa 2013 na nikio cira watwarirwo igoti-ini wa gutetia moimirira ma githurano kiu ona gutuika mucirithania munene wa igoti Itũgĩru hindi yo ndagitari Willy Mutunga augire githurano giatabanirio na njira igwete ni gwakorirwo na mendekithia moria IEBC igikorwo igithondeka na kugathika ugitiri na uigiririki mitambo-ini yayo niguo githurano giatabanio moimirira makio magakorwo mari magwitikirika mwaka-ini wa 2017 niguo twambiriirie ta tukuhimbiria utaramu na mitambo na gikiro kinene gutuikaga hakuhi gicunji kia 50 hari igana kia githurano kia mwaka wa 2017 kiahuthirire mitambo giatwarwo igoti-ini IEBC ni yoririo kiuria kia ciuria cigana ona cigemaine na uhuthiri wa mitambo ikiremwo ni gucokia na ikiremwo kuhingurira igoti na hindi yo Raila Odinga uria watetagia moimirira macio mweke wa kuona maundu maria mathiaga na mbere mitambo-ini na uguo mwaka-ini wa 2022 tukihimbiria mitambo ciuria cia uigiririki na ugitiri wa mitambo iyo no cirathi na mbere na kwiyumiria rita riri ni turaiguire Raila Odinga akira igoti ati he andu a kuma Venezuela mari no hoti wa kuingira mitambo-ini ya IEBC no ndu wa kumakania ni ati ti meguku bururi-ini me handu hothe thiini wa thi angikorwo igoti ni rigwitikaniria na undu ucio kuringana na wira uria utemanitio na kuringana na uria iguthuthuria cira uyu ni rigukorwo rigitutariria tungigathika ugitiri na njira iriku iria igutigirira ati githurano na mitambo ya IEBC ni yakorwo ikigitirwo na njira igwete uhoro wa gutuma maumirira toria moima kuria matura-ini mutaratara uyu ungiagirithio na njira iriku na toria ngwirite muthikiria na mwiroreri wa Inoro TV macira ta maya ni mabata tondu ni maguthie na mbere na gututeithiriria kugitira mutaratara witu wa githurano muthenya wa umuthi igoti agikorwo ni rikuona mathenya maria maumanire na uhuthiri wa mitambo ni rigukorwo rigitutariria tungigeria kuthinga mathenya macio na njira riku na uguo tugo watariria mutaratara wa gututariria kana mitambo no taramu wa githurano bururi-ini wa Kenya ni mwega tukumenya muthenya wa umuthi mathenya maguo na tungimathothinga na njira riku kaundu kangi tugukorwo tukirora na njira nene ni kiuria kia ithabu ria muhotani riagirire gutabanio na njira iriku turakorirwo tukiona andu makiuga mathabu meko na njira eno muhotani ni ndagitari William Ruto no mwena wa Raila Odinga ogitetia moimira maya okaiga ithabu riri ungirika na formula iria ciothe iraheanwo ni IEBC kana athathauri a maundu ma mathabu gutire mundu wakinyirie gicunji kia 50% na kuna uguo ni kuga muthenya wa umuthe ona gutuika cira-ini wa mwaka wa 2013 igoti ni ria tutariirie uria twagirire gwika ithabu riri na mwaka wa 2017 bado rigitutariria uria ithabu ria 50% plus 1 riagirire gwikwo ni kuga ati bururi nduri uraithirania njira ya gwika ithabu riu na muthenya wa umuthe ni tukorwo tugiithiranirio makiria tuikare tukimenyaga riria uracaria ithabu ria 50% plus 1 ni utaraga kura iria ciarega gutarwo ciathuka tondu IEBC roigaga atiriri kuhitukira wakiri wayo Mohatsmane ati riria uratara kura wambaga gutara andu aria othe wambaga kuoya register ya aikia a kura kahinda-ini gaka ina makiria ma andu milioni 22 ugacoka ukarora ni andu igana moimira andu milioni 14 akoiga ati ungienda kurora no wahotana gatagati ka andu ya milioni 14 na ngirita 300 no nginya wambe urute kura iria ciathuka ni ciathukire githurano-ini kia mwaka wa 2022 cia gituro gia president ni kura 113 IEBC ikoiga ati ndungitaranĩria ndungetha muhotani na ukihuthagira kura ici cia iria ciathuka na igote na IEBC yugaga ni kumana na itua riria tuirwo mwaka-ini wa 2013 na 2017 no Raila Odinga kuhitukira wakiri wake Paul Mwangi areraga igoti abai murugame tutingika ithabu riu na njira iyo tondu wa riri mundu ucio wathire guikia kura ri tondu ni atuire ndahana mundu uria waikarire nyumba ni atuire itua ria gukira agithie agiikia kura no aikia kura ri tondu ni atuire itua riake ni gutua atatuire uria kwagiriire na njira ringi ya kumark iratathi uria gutagiriire ri kana akiriikia haria hatagiriire ri mundu ucio kura yake ni yagiriire gutarwo ndiagiriire guturanirio ta ya mundu waikarire nyumba
na undu ungi wa weru na ni njui mwiroreri kana mundu wothe uria waikirie kura ni egukorwo agieterera kuigua mwerekero uria igoti rigukorwo rikiheana ni uhoro wigie miatuka thiini wa commission ya IEBC ririkana commission ino ikoragwo iroreirwo ni a Kenya othe tondu thutha wa maimirira kana thutha wa githurano mwerekero uria kuheana ucio riu niguo a Kenya makoragwo metereire na rita riri ni turonire miatuka na kuringana na maundu maria maratemanagio guku igoti-ini ni turonaga mwena wa Raila Odinga ugitariria uhoro wa Chebukati eta muikariri gitu wa commission ino igatariria uria arakoragwo agitwarithia na mbere maundu megie githurano giki eta mundu kiumbe kana ate gutindanirira na woni wa kana ate gukuruhania ma commission aya angi na ni turonire ona uire-ini uria watemanitio ni andu aya makiuga kuringana na mawira maria maheirwo meta ma commissioner ti mawira hihi makiri na itemi ria bata thiini wa githurano giki na angikorwo ni mawira mari na itemi ria bata kiugo kia muthia kirakoragwo na Chebukati na koguo ni turonaga ona majaji aya mugwanja makiuria ciuria cia ngai Chebukati uyu ngai hinya wake ukinyite ha ngai aya angi kuringana na katiba ri ngai hinya wao ukinyite ha na ni tugweterera kuona tondu hindi ria kwagea na miatuka thiini wa commission ya bata teno ona Kenya noguo makoragwo na makiuria ciuria ni twagirirwo ni kumetikia ni twagirirwo gwitikia mutaratara uria wothe marakoragwo kana mutaratara wothe wa githurano uria maratafanirie na mwena uyu wa William Ruto ugetetera ni uraugaga ati angikorwo mwena wa Raila Odinga ni urauga githurano giteanirio ri ati tondu gitiatafanirio na njira ya waragania ri aria angi mathurirwo ituro-ini icio ingi na marekithirio githurano no commission ino ya IEBC ri ni kwa wawatia ona cia witeanirio kana guthia atia oho ni turonaga makigeria gutariria horo wigie mahinya maria Chebukati agereirwo gukorwo namo na hihi bica yothe ya miatukeo uria uritu ucio wa miatukateo irakorwo ikirehere kana wagagu uria irarehe guku bururi-ini na koguo nitugweterera kuona igoti mwerekero uria rigukorwo rikiheanira uhoro wigie itua kana mwanya ucio
na ni itua rigukorwo ria bata muno tondu ni rigutariria IEBC ikiingira githurano-ini irirutaga wira uhana atia tondu kiuria kiria kiroragio igoti-ini ni commissioner aya ana maumukanirwo na muikariri giti wa IEBC Wafula Chebukati ni tondu ni mahanire ta maga kuiguithania ni tondu wa moimirira gukori tondu mukenya ni atua itua riake kuria matura-ini ri igoti ri gukorwo rigitutariria atiriri itua riu ni riagirire gukorwo rikiariririo ni mundu kana gikundi kia andu hangi mbere ya matuite itua ria no muhotani ni kiuria gigukorwo kiri gia bata no ona rigikoragwo ri ria bata gicokia mwiroreri na muthikiria wa Inooro TV thutha mucirithania wa igoti kana president wa commission ya ruhonge rwa igoti uria noe mucirithania munene Martha Koome akihungwo niguo riria macaragia uria kuona wira uyu akihungwo ni oririo kiuria kia murutire wake wa wira ukoragwo uhana atia makiria riria mena andu agikiro kiiganaine nowe agakorwo tari we murugamu na ari tatugiritio hanini na kiuria kinene kihana ta igoti-inĩ itũgĩru acirithania othe mũgwanja makoragwo maiganaine qualifications ciao nĩ ciganaine no weri agakorwo eragwo nĩ first amongst equals atũgĩrĩtio gatagatĩ ka andũ arĩa maiganaine kiuria kĩrĩa oririo ni arirutithanagia wira atia atekuna aya angi matekuna ta ciuga ciao cirahana ta ciragirwo kiene akiuga we etikitie kiugo giake gia githungu kiari collegiality ati nijitikitie kurutithania wira na andu aya tuiguithanitie nigetha tugatacukia ikinya turi hamwe na mutarata ciro githie na mbere ngwiciria muthikiria wa Inooro TV ni araikaraga akiguaga akimeta my brother judges and my sister judges ni undu wa bata ugituithania cira toyo riria andu magire gukorwo makirutithania wira mahukanite ni tukuona acirithania ya megukorwo kiugo kia kiuria gia collegiality no ri megukorwo makituithania atia riria commission iratabania githurano tondu commission aya maratwira makiruta mawira maya mangire mahana ta maiguanaga kiria mataiguithanirie ni githurano so haria tukiinekereria niguo tukanirire mwiroreri niguo tukanirire muhotani wa githurano ri commission ya IEBC yagirire kuruta wira ate ukorwo kiri kiuria gia bata muno na muthenya wa umuthi ni tukuona kana mucirithania munene ni gukorwo akinyaniirie kiraniro gia kurutithania wira na maabitha ake toria akirutire hindi ria ahungagwo niguo aheo wira gia kana tuone kana acirithania yothe ni megukorwo makiruta itua rihanaine tondu magikinya hau uguo kingikorwo kiri ringikorwo ri itacukia rinene ria uhotani kuri igoti riri rungu rwa Martha Koome gukorwo rikinyanirie itua rinene ria bata na acirithania othe magatacukia itua rihanaine
na togorona thiini wa TV ya kumwiroreri wa Inooro TV ucio ni Veronica Maina uria ukoragwo ari mwandiki kuria thiini wa kiama kia UDA na ni gatagati ka andu aria marathie na mbere na gwikinya guku nigetha gwikinya mathaa ma thaa thita kana cira munene uria twetereire ukorwo ugituithanio na waweru thiini wa kana thiini wa matua manene maria twirigireire igoti no rikorwo rigitua itua ria guteaniria moimirira ma githurano giki kuringana na wira uria makionete kana kuringana na maundu maria maronire kana mathenya maria maronire tondu ririkana ona kungikorwo na mathenya thiini wa githurano giki igoti no riuge tutinona ithenya inene kana ithenya riria turonire kana mahitia maria turonire ti makinyaniru gukorwo tugiteaniria githurano ririkana githurano ni undu ukoragwo ukihuthira mabilioni ma mbeca undu mwe na mathaa ma Kenya na mathaa maingi ma mawira ma andu magakorwo magiteo koguo mathenya maria IEBC yonete no ria kana mathenya maria Supreme Court gukorwo yonete no uria egukorwo ikiheana mwerekera ati nigetha mwaka wa 2027 tutigane kore haha ri twagirirwo guthio no na ninge kuringana na maundu maria egugikorwo kana maria ekoretwo ekirora thiini wa thikũ ici igĩrĩ makoretwo marĩ keheri-inĩ hihi no makorwo makiuga tutinona wira muiganu wa gukorwo tugiteaniria githurano giki kana moimirira ma githurano giki kiria kiratabanirio mweri-inĩ wa kanana
ndio kana kuria kwanyu Nyandarua kana ni Laikipia kundu gwitagwo maundu ni meri uguo no muthi maundu ni meri na ti ma Laikipia either igoti riteanirie kana rikindire. Guteaniria ni kuga moimirira ma muthenya wa moimirira maria manirwo tariki 15 mweri wa 8 ni Wafula Chebukati mateanirio bururi ucoke githurano-ini. Twakinya hau tukuoya thiku 60 niguo IEBC icoke kiharo iharirie ikorwo igitabania githurano kingi. Wona yakindira ikinya riria IEBC yatacukirie tariki 15 ni kuga ati ni gukindira uhotani wa President Muthure Ndagitari William Ruto na munini wake Rigathi Gachagua, na kiria riu gikwambiriria ni kamiti ya igongona ria Ituika igucokereria cikaro ciayo itabanie igongona ria kwihitithia area ya na muthenya wa kwihitithio ni ugathikitwo ni igoti. Magire kwihitithio muthenya wa kanana thutha wa itua riri. Muthenya wa kanana ugakorwo uri tariki 13 na ugakorwo uri muthenya wa keri na ni mweri-ini uyu. Uguo ni kuga twaniri na watho no ugite magire kwihitithio kuma thaa 4 nginya thaa 8 cia muthenya, na ugacoka ugakindira ati kamiti iyo ya Ituika yagirire gucabithia ngatheti-ini ya thirikari notithia haria andu aya magirire kwihitithio. Mwaka-ini wa 2013 President Uhuru Kenyatta ehitithirio rita ria mbere agituika president kiharo-ini gia Kasarani, atetera giturwa giake no kuo macokire akihitithirio kuo. Ni tukuona President Muthure agikorwo itua nire gukindirwo tugucoka guikaria atia no twero tucoke githurano-ini. Undu wa bata ni ati igoti no rigututariria IEBC igukorwo itariete tondu twero tucoke ithurano-ini ni kwiro tukwirwo IEBC ndiatabanirie githurano na njira iria yagireire, na ikorwo IEBC ndiatabanirie githurano na njira iria yagireire ni gutaririo. Agikorwo ni mugucoka githurano-ini mathenya maria mwagirire kuhinga ni maya na maya na maya na maya. Wona twarikia hau no gucoka tugucokereria bururi kiria tugwiciria kahinda-ini gaka tutigaritie ndagika ta 5 uguo niguo tuingire igoti-ini twambiririe guthikiriria itua ria acirithania aya. No kwira a Kenya mathie na mbere na gutugiria thayu uhoreri. Honge itiganite na ikundi cia guku bururi-ini na nja wa bururi ni citugiritie bururi wa Kenya ni tondu uria ukoretwo ugitabania mutaratara mugima wa githurano, thayu uria a Kenya makoretwo naguo. Tutingiuga ati gutikoretwo na kawaga karia gakorwo gakiuma muthenya ta wa umuthi ungithie taoni gutire andu, ngari itire barabara-ini uria cikoragwo ciri, na no ngwira a Kenya mathie na mbere na gutugiria thayu, makorwo na uhoreru. Maita maingi honge cia ugitiri citutariirie ati ugitiri ni mugacirithie na njira o yothe ona thutha wa muthenya wa umuthi. A Kenya muthenya wa rucio no nginya mundu okire acoke atabanie mihango yake toria tumimenyerete nigetha bururi ucokererie kwa toria tumenyerete. No he kiuria kingi hau ha itua riguthia atia iguru ria guo ni tuonete makiria mundu ta Raila Odinga uria cira wake uri igoti-ini riri akoretwo akiuga thengie angikorwo moimirira maya ni meguteanirio mateanirio na mundu na thogora wa cira uyu tondu ni wa mamilioni magana ma mamilioni ma mbeca. Cira uyu thogora ukirio kuri mundu uria ukuonekana na mahitia, na no tuonete ona IEBC ikiuga ati angikorwo uhotani wa Ndagitari William Ruto ni ugukindirwo wakindirwo thogora wa cira uikirio aria marehete cira uyu igoti-ini, tondu ni kuga maroiga ati aikorwo IEBC niyo yathogire githurano tutingiikara tugicokaga githurano-ini tugicokaga igoti-ini o thutha wa githurano. Uguo no nginya mundu rimwe akue murigo wa iherithia ari mundu kiumbe kana marita institution nigetha gutigirira ati mahitia ta maya makiria maria mararehwo ni andu kiumbe na matua mao maria matararumirira watho makorwo makigua ruo ruu. Aikorwo ni Raila Odinga uria IEBC yugite ati ni agirire gukuithio murigo wa thogora uyu, uga IEBC igaga ati no nginya twambiririe kuhimbiria unduire wa gwitikiraga moimirira toria manirirwo ni commission ya ithurano, tigo ikaraga hindi ciothe warega kuiganira ukahanyuka igoti-ini igoti rigakindira moimirira na gutire mundu waherithio ni undu uguo. Ni turona iguru ria maundu maria andu matiganite maria marehete cira uyu marendekithia ni marenda thogora wa thogora wa kurehe cira igoti-inĩ ukorwo ugikiririo mwena uria ungi. Ngigeria gucorera muthikiria na mwirore wa Inoro TV mbica ya thogora uria turaririria mwaka-ini wa 2017 IEBC yahuthirire ciringi mirioni 202 gukorwo ikihanda cira wa gutetera moimirira ma githurano kia mwaka wa 2017. Ihinda riri tondu mahinda ni macenjetie ni undu wa inflation na maundu ta mau, thogora ucio wahota kwambatira na muno makiria ni undu wa ikiro cia mawakiri maria makoretwo commission-ini ya ithurano guku igoti-ini, na ngigucokia thutha tondu ndari kuria Bomas ni andu mawakiri maingi mundu ta Professor Githumu Igai, Kamau Karori ndambiririe kumona mari na IEBC okuma kuria Bomas magithurima mutaratara mugima wa githurano. Uguo ni kuga ati kahinda gaka athire wa IEBC ucokete thutha o hindi yo nginyagia kahinda gaka, na nikio rona andu na honge itiganite iria cirehete cira uyu igoti-ini cikiuga ati kiria kwagirire gwika kahinda-ini gaka ni thogora uyu wa cira ukorwo ugikiririo mundu uria ukuhotwo nigetha tuma kihinda-ini giki mundu agakorwo agitikira moimirira na uria uhetwo uigiririki wa gutongoria githurano agagitongoria na njira iria yagirire undu moimirira megukorwo magitikirika.
Na Waweru o tukiaragia hau hegie andu aria matanaiganira na githurano gukorwo makirehe cira magoti-ini, na kurerekana umwe wa maundu maria mateithiriirie a Kenya gukorwo na ukindiriku ihinda-ini riri riothe ni aria marahuranagira giturwa giki gia president kuma hau kabere ni mareraraga arumiriri ao angikorwo tutikaiganira na moimirira maya ni tugathie igoti-ini na ihinda riu tukorwo tugieterera itua riria igoti rigakorwo rigitua. Na koguo ni turona ona bururi urageria gukorwo ukihokera honge iria ihetwo wira muna irekie wira waguo mbere ya gukorwo akenya makioa makinya mangi, tondu korwo ni ta mwaka wa 2017 thutha wa maimirira na mwaho umwe gukorwo kiregana na maimirira ona makimenyaga ni meguthie kinya riu ringi gukorwo makirehe cira igoti-ini, na guku ni kuo gukire na itua ria muthia. Ni tuonire andu mari na wagagu, ni tuonire miario ya atongoria maronania matire na wihokeku na igoti, no rita riri tuonete akenya mahoreire na undu mwe na atongoria magithie na mbere na gutindikiriria arumiriri ao. Reke tweterere itua ria igoti na twinama kuringana na acirithania kana kuringana na acirithania mawakiri aria turi nao, kuringana na wira uria tuhotete kungania o mwena ukauga turi nama igoti ni rigukorwo rigitua itua kuringana na mwena wa o mwena.
Na hau ni habata ni ndirikanaga ndi kuria thukuru-ini wa muthingi Rwaka Primary School he mwarimu wetagwo Mr. Gafefe weka kaundu kega akwiraga ni kiara, na ngwiciria kahinda-ini gaka bururi wa Kenya no nginya wire President muthure ndagitari William Ruto, munini wake Rigathi Gachagua, uria urarirukagia tigiti wa Azimio la Umoja Raila Odinga na mutirithia wake Martha Karua, no nginya ithuothe twita bururi tumere ni kiara, tondu kahinda-ini gaka gothe makoretwo makira arumiriri ao makorwo no uhoreru ukiririria na mathie na mbere na mihango yao to uria mamenyerete. Igoti ni rikuruta wira wao, magathie na mbere na gukindirira bururi ati itua riria rikuma guku igoti-ini ni megukorwo makiritia. Ni undu wa bata nginya andu amwe aria mokite guthurima githurano giki moimite ikundi-ini cia nja wa bururi marona ritonekaga kaingi gitaru-ini kia Africa ati andu aya marari githurano-ini kirari na mbitika nditu tondu muhotani ri matinatigana na makiria ma kura 300,000. In fact utiganu wa kura cia orari 231. Angikorwo githurano kirari no cindani ucio na atongoria aya miahu ino eri atongoria ayo ni marahota kwira andu ao horerai tweterere institutions o institution aikoro ni IBC ni yaruta wira wayo ni tutinaiganira no ria yaruta wira, reke tuthie haria igoti riri kuri ruhonge rwa igoti ruthurime itua riri na gatagati-ini ka maundu maya mothe ni ritana ria thayo. Ngwiciria ni uhotani munene kuri gitaru kia kuri bururi wa Kenya na makiria gitaru-ini kia Africa, na ngwiciria gutekumakania uria itua rikumira muthenya wa umothe tutingiaga gutugiria atongoria a ngwataniro iria igire irarutire andu aria marari haria gaturu-ini ga kihitaitano giki ni tondu woria makoretwo magitiririra mihango ya gutigirira ati igoti rigithie na mbere na cira uyu ni gwakorwo na thayo wa gikiro kia iguru. Muthenya ta wa ira Raila Odinga agicemania na atongoria akuma kuria Meru arerire bururi wa Kenya Akenya horerai itua rĩa tuo nĩ tũkũmenya makinya marĩa tũgũtacũkia kumanagia na hau. President Muthure na mũnini wake nao marĩ na gũkũ mwena wa Njoro kaunti-inĩ ya Naikuru, nao maroiga nĩ mehotorete gũtigĩrĩra atĩ nĩ marũmĩrĩra watho wa igoti o ta ũrĩa ũgũkorwo ũhana gũtekũmakania nũ kũhotana. Ũguo ngwĩciria thutha wa maũndũ mothe bũrũri wa Kenya ũgũkorwo ũhotanĩte nĩ tondũ wa ngumo ĩrĩa twakorwo twethondekera gĩtarũ-inĩ kĩa Africa. Na nĩ ũrona ngumo ĩno ĩrathiĩ na mbere na gũtũgĩrio nĩ honge itiganĩte. Rĩu ta barothi wa America Whitman iyo kũrĩa kaunti-inĩ ya Naikuru nĩ akorirwo akiuga nĩ agegetio nĩ thayũ wa bũrũri wa Kenya atĩ thutha wa gĩthurano kĩna handiti Akenya no marathiĩ na mbere na mĩhang'o yao. Akenya nĩ mambĩrĩirie ũrĩa ũmata wa ndũgũ yao nĩ ũrathiĩ na mbere na kuonekana. Nĩ wonete barothi a ngwatanĩro ya ũrũmwe wa mabũrũri ma Ngeretha Raila Odinga nĩ erĩga kwaranĩria na mwandĩki mũnene wa ngwatanĩro ya ũrũmwe wa mabũrũri Antonio Guterres, na othe maragĩrĩria ũhoro wa thayũ, ũhotani ũrĩa bũrũri wa Kenya ũgũthiĩ na mbere na kwĩyandĩkĩra thutha wa gĩthurano gĩkĩ. Na nĩ ngwĩciria nĩ ũndũ wagĩrĩire gũkorwo gũtũma kũrĩ mũkenya o wothe harĩa arĩ akorwo akĩigua arĩ mũndũ wa bata mũno gĩtarũ-inĩ kĩa Africa, na ngwĩciria mũndũ wĩna ũtiganu mũnene na andũ arĩa angĩ a gĩtarũ kĩa Africa, tondũ ti andũ aingĩ makoragwo magĩtabania gĩthurano na njĩra ĩna thayũ na gĩgakorwo kĩrĩ in fact ndĩrarora gũkũ igoti nĩ kũihũire andĩki a mohoro akuma nja wa bũrũri. Aingĩ magĩũka gũkũ meciragia maroka kwandĩka rũgano rwa ngũĩ rwa mbara. Aingĩ nĩ tũmenyete mathiĩte kaunti-inĩ cia Naikuru, angĩ me kaunti-inĩ cia Uasin Gishu, angĩ mathiĩte kaunti-inĩ cia Gĩthumo, tondũ mena mentality ĩrĩa menayo atĩ mbara nĩ kumĩra kuo nĩ gũgũkorwo na ngurutithanio. No gũkũ onao matirĩ na wĩra mararuta. Amwe nĩ arĩa maikarĩire mahiga, angĩ nĩ kũrũra marorũra gũkũ. Nĩ twaima andũ aingĩ rũgano rũrĩa makoragwo moĩ rwa Africa, na nĩ ũhotani mũnene mũno kũrĩ bũrũri wa Kenya na ngwĩciria by extension kũrĩ gĩtarũ kĩa Africa.
Thengio mũno wa Werũ wa Nyambura, na thayũ ũcio noguo tũroria Akenya mathiĩ na mbere na kũiga gũtekũmakania itua rĩrĩa igoti rĩgũkorwo. Thengio mũno, na maũndũ ta macio nĩmo marathiĩ na mbere na kũhanĩka gũkũ thĩinĩ wa cikaro cia igoti itũgĩru, na kwa ihinda rĩrĩ tũthiĩ ĩmwe kwa ĩmwe thĩinĩ wa igoti.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Supreme Court of Kenya for the delivery of judgment in Presidential Election Petition number E005 of 2022 as consolidated with E001, E002, E003, E004, E007 and E008 of 2022, Raila Amolo Odinga and 6 others versus William Ruto and 13 others. The Honorable Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court is presiding.
Thank you. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, this is the judgment of the court, which is delivered pursuant to Rule 23(1) of the Supreme Court Presidential Election Petition Rules 2017 in the presidential election held on the 9th August 2022. This is an abridged version of the judgment. The full judgment will be delivered after 21 days. Kenya is a sovereign multi-party democratic state whose foundations are firmly spelled in the Constitution. The Kenyan people's quest for electoral reforms since independence is well documented. That notwithstanding, and even without going back to the pre-1992 era, every cycle of elections has been highly contested, with the exception of 2002. This speaks to a background of distrust of the administration of our electoral process. Informed by this setting, Kenyans made a decision to vest the Supreme Court with the jurisdiction to determine questions regarding the validity of a presidential election under Article 140 of the Constitution. The reactions following the declaration of results of the presidential election of 9th August 2022 shows that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, has not yet garnered universal public confidence and trust in the internal management of the Commission and elections. On the 15th August 2022, 6 days after the general elections were held, Mr. Wafula Chebukati, the chairperson of IEBC, announced the following results. Raila Odinga, 6.942,930 votes, representing 48.85%. William Ruto, 7.176,141 votes, representing 50.49%. David Wahiga, 31,987, representing 0.23%. George Wajakoya, 61,969, representing 0.44%. Based on the aforesaid results, the chairperson of IEBC declared William Samoei Ruto the first respondent, the presidential candidate for the United Democratic Alliance Party, as the president-elect. This declaration has precipitated a total of 9 presidential petitions that are filed before us, to wit, number 1, presidential election number 001 of 2022, John Njoroge Kamau versus Wafula Chebukati and 3 others, and Raila Amolo Odinga and 7 others named as interested parties. The second petition is presidential election number 002 of 2022, Youth Advocacy Africa and another versus IEBC and 12 others. Third petition, presidential election petition number 003 of 2022, Kerif Khalifa and 3 others versus IEBC and 3 others. Fourth petition, presidential election petition number 4 of 2022, David Kariuki Ngari versus IEBC and 9 others. 5, presidential election petition number 5 of 2022, Raila Amolo Odinga and another versus IEBC. 6, presidential election petition number 6 of 2022 by Moses Kuria and others versus Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga and 4 others named as interested parties. Number 7, presidential election number 007 of 2022, Okia Omtata Okoiti and others versus IEBC and others. Number 8, petition number 008 of 2022, Julia Nyokabi Chege and others versus IEBC and 3 others. And the last one, but not least, petition number 009 of 2022, Ruben Kigame Richete versus IEBC and others. In addition to these petitions, we received a total of 24 interlocutory applications and 1 preliminary objection, which were filed in this court. 2 of the presidential election petitions were struck out. That is petition number 006 and 009 of 2022 for failure to meet the constitutional threshold as set out under Article 140 of the Constitution. On 29 August 2022, this court also admitted 3 amici curiae briefs by the Royal Society of Kenya, the Kenya section of International Commission of Jurists, and John Warubengo and 2 others. Upon perusing and considering the issues raised in the remaining presidential election petition, numbers 001, 002, 003, 004, 005, 007, and 8, the responses and the submissions filed thereto, this court found that all the 7 petitions substantially raised similar issues and sought similar reliefs. Consequently, on 30th August 2022, this court ordered that the 7 petitions be consolidated and designated Presidential Election Petition number 005 of 2022 as the read file. From the consolidated petition, the responses filed and submissions filed by all the parties, the court crystallized the following issues for determination. And those issues are there. We have repeated them several times. I will not read them. Having considered and deliberated upon the consolidated petition, the attendant responses, submissions, and also considering the amici curiae briefs, we now make the following determination on issue number 1, which is whether the technology deployed by IBC for the conduct of the 2022 general elections met the standards of integrity, verifiability, security, and transparency to guarantee accurate and verifiable results. As noted in the introduction, lack of trust in the electoral system has endured in Kenya for a long time. This led to the introduction of electoral technology following recommendations made by the Independent Review Commission on the general elections held on the 27th December 2007, popularly known as the Kriegler Commission report. That report recommended integration of technology into Kenya's electoral process for registration, identification of voters, and transmission of results. These were enacted in Section 44 of the Elections Act 2011. By this statute, IBC is enjoined to adopt technology in the electoral process. As a consequence, the IBC developed a technology known as Kenya Integrated Electoral Management System, KIMS, making Kenya's election process an hybrid as it employed both technology and manual processes. The first, third, and fourth petitioners in the consolidated petition challenge the technology used by IBC during the 2022 general election. They plead that the manner in which technology was deployed and utilized fell short of the prescribed constitutional and statutory standards. As regards the audit of the register of voters, they urge that IBC, pursuant to its elections operations plan, committed itself to conducting an audit of the register of voters by 31st March 2022, To the contrary, they allege it only publicly availed the audit report on its website on 2nd August 2022, which was only 7 days to the elections. In this report, it was noted that the auditors established serious gaps and risk to the electoral process, including numerous cases of change of voter stations without knowledge or approval of the affected voters. Grant of voter update privileges in IMBC, IDMs, to 14 user accounts and related to voter registration. Reducing the accountability of user activities in the register of voters. Presence of 11 active generic accounts on the MBIS application and the 2 MBIS users with the same logging identification. Risking unauthorized system users, possible interference, change of particulars on the activation of voters in the system. IMBC's failure to set up access, decertification, and user activity review process. And IMBC was also arranged to have failed to respond to requests by auditors for crucial information. On the integrity of the technology deployed, it was the case for the 7th petitioner that in order to comply with Article 86 of the Constitution and Section 44 of the Elections Act, the technology deployed must be simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. On the simplicity of technology, the 7th petitioner contends that the KIMS kits failed the tests as they were not easily usable by ordinary citizens without expert knowledge. They further assert that IMBC was expected to procure and put in place a technology necessary for the conduct of the general election at least 120 days before the election and ensure consultation with the relevant agencies, institutions, and stakeholders. Furthermore, the petitioners arranged that IMBC violated its constitutional duty by delegating the design, implementation, and conduct of the KIMS components of the election to a foreign company, Smartmatic International Holdings, BV. As a result, IMBC staff and the public did not have full comprehension of the KIMS components. They conclude, therefore, that IMBC abdicated and surrendered its role to conduct elections to Smartmatic, and that IMBC vigorously fought any attempt to subject Smartmatic's activities to accountability and transparency, including the safeguards required by Regulation 61, 69, and 75 of the Elections General Regulations 2012. In response, IMBC has submitted that the electoral system met the constitutional threshold, that all the necessary information was accessed only by the authorized persons. The information was accurate, complete, and protected from malicious modification, either by authorized or unauthorized persons. IMBC maintained an audit trail on activities related to information, and that the information was available and could be authenticated through the use of various security features. In further response, IMBC contended that they engaged KPMG on 7th April 2022 to conduct an audit of the register of voters which was submitted on 18th June 2022. In addition, it issued a briefing on the report on 20th June 2022, summarizing the thematic areas therein and disclosing its findings as well as actions taken to remedy the issues identified. It also conducted its annual audit in compliance with Regulations 11 and 12 of the Election Technology Regulations 2017 and a certification of compliance issued to it on 3rd August 2022. IBC relied on sworn affidavits by Michael Ouma, Moses Sunkuri, and Hussein Majan on 26th August 2022, which were to the effect that it published the interim report by KPMG on 8th June 2022 and embarked on remedial measures aimed at effecting the recommendations ahead of publication of the final report. It was ascertained that it could not publish the full final audit report, as doing so would compromise the integrity and security of the electoral technology system, considering the provisions of the Data Protection Act, which imposes a duty to protect the data of Kenyan voters. On the other hand, the first and second respondents urged that even if there was failure of technology, it did not vitiate the result of the presidential election. Upon considering all the printing submissions and the ICT scrutiny and inspection tallying and recount report, which fully examined the IEBC's result transmission system, RTS, we are not persuaded by the allegation that the technology deployed by IEBC failed the standard of Article 86A of the Constitution on integrity, verifiability, security, and transparency for the following reasons. 1, whereas it is true that the KIMS kit failed in 235 polling stations, 86,889 voters were granted the right to vote manually, and the requisite forms 32A were duly filed. This happened successfully in Kibwezi West constituency and parts of Kakamega County. 2, while the audit report was released to the public 7 days before the 9th August election, the register of voters was used at the election without any apparent anomalies. 3, Smartmatic was procured to provide the necessary technological infrastructure, as IEBC did not have the capacity to do so. No credible evidence meeting the requisite standard of proof of access to the system by unauthorized persons was adduced by the petitioners. The scrutiny report prepared by the registrar of this court did not reveal any security breaches of the IEBC's RTS. IEBC successfully deployed a biometric voter register system which captures unique features of a voter's facial image, fingerprints, and civil data to register and update voter details across the country and also in the diaspora. The BVR captures a voter's facial image, fingerprints, and civil data, which features are unique to each of the voter. In compliance with Section 6A of the Elections Act 2011, IEBC opened the register of voters for verification of biometric data by members of the public for a period of 30 days. Thereafter, the register was devised to address issues arising from the verification exercise. KPMG then audited the register, and we are satisfied that the inconsistencies and inaccuracies identified during the audit were somewhat successfully addressed. The second issue was whether there was interference with the uploading and transmission of Forms 34A from the polling station to the INBC public portal. The first petitioner arranged staging that a person who had access to the RTS intercepted, detained, or stored Forms 34A temporarily to convert or manipulate it before uploading it on INBC's public portal. It is arranged also on 11th August 2022, INBC dumped over 11,000 Forms 34A on the public portal between 11 to 11:09 hours. To rebut this allegation, INBC and its chairperson, in their response dated 26th August 2022, denied staging and unauthorized intrusion of the RTS. In that regard, they urged that every image of Form 34A was uploaded immediately after the transmittal of results. The form was received as evidence by the timestamp. Similarly, the first respondent denied these allegations. Our finding: 1, no credible evidence was presented to prove that anyone accessed the RTS to intercept, detain, or store Forms 34A temporarily before they were uploaded to the public portal. The allegation that 11,000 Forms 34A were affected by staging was similarly not proved. 2, the allegation that INBC, its officials and strangers used a tool to tamper with the Forms 34A before converting them to the portable document format, that is PDF, that eventually appeared on the public portal, was sufficiently explained when INBC demonstrated how KIMS captured and transmitted the image of Form 34A. Accordingly, we dismiss that allegation. 3, during the ICT scrutiny, it turned out that the transmission logs produced in the affidavit of Justice Nyangaya were of no probative value. The registrar's report shows that the original Forms 34A from the contestant polling stations, which were allegedly intercepted, were exactly the same as those on the public portal, and the certified copies that were presented to this court pursuant to the provisions of Section 12 of this Supreme Court Act 2011. 4, regarding the allegation that the integrity of the public portal was compromised, this was disproved by evidence of consistent attributes such as unique timestamps, uniform PDF conversions at the polling stations, correct polling station mapping, and consistent KIMS reporting from verification to transmission of results. 6, the RTS was configured on a virtual platform network, VPN, and the SIM cards locked to a specific polling station. The server was also configured to accept results only from authorized and properly mapped KIMS kits. In our view, the petitioners failed to produce credible evidence to the contrary. 7. A review of some of the logs presented as evidence of staging showed that they were either from logs arising from the 2017 presidential election or were outright forgeries. In our considered view, there was no evidence of a man-in-the-middle server configured to the IEBC's VPN network, and no evidence was produced to show that the chairperson of IEBC and staff were part of the arranged conspiracy to stage the transmission process. 9, whether there was a difference between Forms 34A uploaded on the IEBC public portal and the Forms 34A received at the National Tallying Center and Forms 34A issued to the agents at the polling stations. On this issue, the first petitioner's case was that there was deliberate manipulation and tampering with Forms 34A, as demonstrated in the affidavits, to the effect that votes were being deducted from the first petitioner and being added to the first respondent. To support this petition, evidence was contained in the affidavits of Honorable Martha Karua, sworn on 21st August 2022, Celestine Anyango Opio, Arnold Ochieng Oginga, and John Mark Githongo, which was sworn also on 21st August 2022, and a further affidavit sworn on 28th August 2022. Dr. Nyangasi also swore an affidavit on 21st August 2022, and so was Martin Papa, to support that allegation of handing and subtraction of votes. On the other hand, IEBC and its chairperson urged that all Forms 34A transmitted to IEBC portal were not interfered with or manipulated. Further, that the Forms 34A signed at the polling station and issued to the agents were identical to the Forms 34A uploaded on the public portal and delivered to the National Tallying Center at the Bomas. It was contended that in any event, IEBC used the original physical Forms 34A to tally, verify, and declare the presidential election results. This court ordered scrutiny of the forms from the 41 polling stations outlined in the affidavit of Celestine Opio to ascertain the allegation of interference. And this is our finding. 1, there were no significant differences captured between the Forms 34A uploaded on the public portal and the physical Forms 34A delivered to Bomas that would have affected the overall outcome of the presidential election. B, no credible evidence was presented to support the allegation that Forms 34A presented to agents differed from those uploaded to the public portal. The report by the registrar of this court confirmed the authenticity of the original forms in the sampled polling stations. The affidavits of Celestine Opio and Arnold Ochieng Oginga, while containing sensational information, were not credible, as the registrar's report confirmed that all the Forms 34A attached to those affidavits and purportedly given to them by the agents at select polling stations were significantly different from the originals, certified copies, and those on the public portal. The purported evidence of Celestine Opio and Arnold Oginga, sworn in their respective affidavits, are not only inadmissible, but are also unacceptable. It has been established that none of the agents on whose behalf the forms were being presented swore any affidavit, that there is nothing to show that they had instructed both Celestine and Arnold to act for them. Yet the two have gone ahead to depone on matters that are not within their knowledge. This court cannot countenance this type of conduct on the part of counsel who are officers of the court. Though it is elementary learning, it bears repeating that affidavits filed in court must deal only with facts which an opponent can prove of his own knowledge, and as a general rule, counsel are not permitted to swear affidavits on behalf of their clients in contentious matters like the one before us, because they run the risk of unknowingly swearing to falsehood and may also be liable to cross-examination to prove the matters deponed. We must remind counsel who appear before this court, or indeed before any other court or tribunal, of the provisions of sections 113 and 114 of the Penal Code that swearing to falsehoods is a criminal offense, and two, that it is an offense to present misleading or fabricated evidence in any judicial proceeding. Section 114 of the Penal Code states, and I quote, "Any person who swears falsely or makes a false affirmation or declaration before any person authorized to administer an oath or a declaration upon a matter of public concern, and at such circumstances that the false swearing or declaration, if committed in a judicial proceeding, would have amounted to perjury, is guilty of a misdemeanor." One of the most serious losses an advocate may ever suffer is the loss of trust by judges for a long time. Such conduct amounts to interference with the proper administration of justice. The contents of the affidavit of John Mark Githongo, which may contain forgeries, are also dismissed for not meeting the evidential threshold. Those averments contain no more than incredible and hearsay evidence. No admissible evidence was presented to prove the allegation that Forms 34A were fraudulently altered by a group situated in Karen under the direction of persons named in the affidavit, and video clip attached to it. As a matter of fact, these two affidavits amount to double hearsay and incapable of being proved at each of the rears. We turn to Form 34A for Gacharaigo Primary School, which was sensationally presented by Madam Judy Soweto, advocate, to show that one Jose Camango accessed the RTS and interfered with the result contained therein. This also turned out to be no more than hot air, and we were taken on a wild goose chase that yielded nothing of probative value. The Kim's kit relating to Songonyo Primary School, which bore the same serial number with another, was admitted by IBC as an inadvertent manufacturer's error. We are also satisfied that the two kits and other identifying features that were markedly different, including the timestamps and polling code, and therefore nothing turns on this anomaly. Therefore, to the question whether there was a difference between Forms 34A uploaded on the IBC public portal and those received at the National Tallying Center and those issued to the candidates' agents at the polling station, we have found none. Issue number 4, on whether the postponement of gubernatorial elections in Kakamega and Mombasa counties, parliamentary elections in Kitui, Rural, Kachiriba, Rongai, and Pokot South constituencies and electoral wards in Nyaki West, in North Imenti constituency, and Kwanjenga in Embakasi South constituency, resulted in voter suppression to the detriment of the petitioners, and especially in petition number 5 of 2022. It is common knowledge that IEBC postponed elections for various seats during the general elections of 9th August 2022 due to mix-up of ballot papers in the above-named electoral units. It is the combined case of the first and second petitioners that, in terms of Articles 136, 2A, 177(1), and 181, as read with Article 1 of the Constitution, the chairperson of IEBC had no jurisdiction to postpone elections in those areas. That Section 55B of the Elections Act is inconsistent with the Constitution and therefore void to the extent that it purports to donate to IEBC power to postpone elections in the constituency, county, or ward, contrary to the Constitution, and the postponement undermined the conduct of free, fair, credible elections by depriving the voters an opportunity to vote for all the candidates on the dates stipulated by the Constitution. The petitioners further contend that the postponement of elections and the overall effect of suppressing voter turnout in the electoral units in question, which was prejudicial to him. Both the first and third petitioners also believe that elections were deliberately postponed in Kakamega and Mombasa counties. It was arranged that these areas are considered to be first petitioner strongholds, and as such, the postponement of elections worked to his disadvantage and handed that benefit to the second respondent. These assertions were denied by IEBC and its chairperson. They, however, admitted that they experienced confusion with the printed ballot papers and explained that they only discovered the mix-up on the eve of the election when the ballot papers were being distributed to the polling stations. That as a practice, ballot papers can only be opened on the eve of the election day to avoid any mischief, and that by the time the mix-up was discovered, it was logistically impossible to print and replace the ballot papers in time for the elections. For this claim to succeed, it must be demonstrated first, IEBC had no authority in law to postpone the elections, and secondly, that the postponement was deliberate and calculated to suppress voter turnout so as to affect the result by reducing the petitioners' overall votes. We've looked at the provisions of Section 55B of the Elections Act, which provides for circumstances when elections can be postponed in a particular electoral unit, including in cases of emergency. We are therefore satisfied that on the basis of the foregoing provision, the third respondent and the requisite power to postpone election in the constituencies, counties, and wards in question. Concerning the allegation of voter suppression, we note that voter suppression is generally recognized as a political strategy which takes many forms, but whose practical effect is ultimately to reduce voting by deliberately discouraging or preventing targeted groups of people from exercising their right to vote, and thereby to influence the outcome of an election. It therefore goes against the letter and the spirit of Article 38, which guarantees every citizen the right to make political choices based on universal suffrage. As regards this allegation, it has not been shown that by postponing elections in the named electoral units, IEBC acted in bad faith or was influenced by irrelevant factors and considerations. From the explanation tendered, we are satisfied that the postponement was occasioned by a genuine mistake, which in our view could have been avoided and the members and staff of IEBC been more diligent when they went to inspect the templates in Athens, Greece, where the printing of ballot papers was undertaken. In the absence of any empirical data, we cannot find a basis upon which to conclude, as a matter of fact or evidence, that the postponement affected voter turnout, as a consequence of which the first petitioner alone, as a presidential candidate, suffered disadvantage. At any rate, the nature of the ballot being an individual decision and secret, there may be other factors to which the turnout in the named units can be attributed. From the evidence on record, however, it appears to us that 2022 general election recorded one of the lowest turnouts since the introduction of multi-party political systems some 30 years ago. If there was a low voter turnout, it affected all the 6 categories of candidates, and its explanation, in our view, lies elsewhere, but certainly not a calculated suppression. On the other hand, in rebuttal to these claims, IEBC illustrated with examples to our satisfaction that there was no nexus between the postponement of elections and voter turnout in the affected units, far from the fact that this claim was undoubtedly just another red herring. It has nothing to do with the question under review, and accordingly we reject it and own that there is no proof that the postponement resulted in voter suppression to the detriment of the first petitioner. Whether there were unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for presidential candidates and other elective positions. Issue number 5. The first petitioner was categorical that there was systemic ballot stuffing in certain counties, mainly in the Rift Valley and central parts of Kenya, where, according to him, a total of 33,208 votes were cast for president only, without corresponding votes for the other elective positions. On the part of IEBC and the chairperson, while acknowledging that indeed in some instances there was vote differential between those cast for president and for other positions, but maintained that they were insignificant, and those instances related to votes by prisoners and citizens in the diaspora who only vote for the president but did not take part in other elective positions. The differential also includes rejected ballot papers and stray votes which do not count as valid votes. The well-established principle that the person who asserts a fact must prove it casts the burden upon the first petitioner to demonstrate that there were instances of ballot stuffing of such a magnitude as to justify the nullification of the presidential election. Ballot stuffing, which is an illegal addition of extra ballots, is a type of electoral fraud aimed at swinging the results of an election towards a particular direction. Not a single document has been presented by the first petitioner to prove systemic ballot stuffing. A figure of 33,208 votes relied on in this claim is based on unproven hypothesis that since the number of votes cast for the president is higher than those for other positions, then, without more, it must follow that there was fraud. We find that fraud is a serious criminal offense, and it must be proved beyond reasonable doubt under Section 5N of the Election Offences Act. It is indeed an offense for a person to vote more than once in any election. IEBC has provided a plausible explanation for the vote differential, citing categories of voters who only vote for the president, such as prisoners and Kenyans in the diaspora. There were an insignificant number of stray votes whose combined effect cannot justify nullification of the election. Finally, on this point, a general election in Kenya comprises of 6 different separate elections held concurrently on the same day. Such elections are held by secret ballot, and one cannot predetermine the voter turnout or how voters will vote in each election. None of the parties has flagged anything so significant that it would have affected the outcome of the presidential election vis-à-vis the other 5 elections held on the same day. We find, therefore, there were no unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for the presidential candidates and other elective positions. On issue number 6, whether IEBC carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of results in accordance with Article 138, 3C, and 138.10 of the Constitution. This issue arises from the printings in all the petitions as consolidated. Based on the said printings, the affidavits sworn in support thereof, and the written and oral submissions by parties, two viewpoints regarding the meaning, scope, and application of Article 138, 3C, and 10 of the Constitution have been advanced. On the one hand, the petitioners submit that pursuant to the foregoing provisions, the role of verifying and tallying of votes as received from polling stations countrywide is vested in the Commission as a corporate entity and not the chairperson of the Commission. It is their argument that the chairperson cannot undertake this task to the exclusion of other commissioners. They submit that the language of Article 138.3c does not envisage a situation where the chairperson can arrogate to himself unfettered authority to verify and tally the results at the National Tallying Center without involving the other commissioners. Such action, they contend, would not only be unconstitutional, but would be sufficient ground without more to nullify an election of a president-elect. In support of their argument, the petitioners cite the Court of Appeal decision in IEBC versus Mainakiai and 5 others as affirmed by this court in the case of Raila 2017. The petitioners further submit that Regulation 87.3 of the Election General Regulations is unconstitutional to the extent that it purports to vest the power of verification and tallying in the chairperson of IEBC. On the other hand, the first, second, and third respondents submit that power to verify, tally, and declare results of a presidential election at the National Tallying Center is the exclusive preserve of the chairperson of IEBC. According to them, there is nothing unconstitutional about Regulation 87.3 of the Elections General Regulations. The said regulation the respondents submit makes no mention of commissioners other than the chairperson. At any rate, the respondents argue Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution does not envisage a situation where it is the commissioners who personally undertake the task of verifying and tallying the results as entered into the thousands of Forms 34A. Such an undertaking would be humanly impossible, they submit. For good measure, the respondents submit that Section 11A of the IEBC Act provides that the chairperson and members of the Commission are responsible for the formulation of policy and strategy of the Commission and oversight. In their view, the Act does not contemplate a situation where commissioners would be directly involved in the verification and tabulation of presidential election results. The task of verification and tallying, as stated by the respondent, is executed by the staff of the Commission under the direction and supervision of the Commission Secretary, who in turn reports to the chairperson. As to whether the chairperson acted unilaterally in verifying and tallying the presidential election results at the National Tallying Center, the petitioners claim that indeed this is what happened. It is the petitioner's case that the chairperson published an illegal Gazette Notice number 4956 of 2022, in which he designated himself as the presidential returning officer, a position unknown in law and the Constitution. Having done so, the petitioner states that the chairperson proceeded to conduct the verification and tallying process to the exclusion of other commissioners, each of whom he had assigned verifiable roles and related to the verification and tallying exercise. On his part, the chairperson of IEBC submitted that although he has the exclusive authority to verify and tally the presidential election results as received at the National Tallying Center, he did involve the other commissioners in the exercise before eventually declaring the final results. He submitted that he did this in the spirit of teamwork. The chairperson of IEBC states that indeed the 4 commissioners were involved in the preparation of the 9th August general elections from the time of their swearing into office all the way to the verification and tallying of results at the National Tallying Center until they withdrew from the exercise just when he was set to declare the final result. Having considered all the parties' submissions, we find that pursuant to Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution, the power to verify and tally presidential election results as received at the National Tallying Center vests not in the chairperson of IEBC, but in the Commission itself. The latter carries out this exercise through its secretariat staff, technical personnel, and any other persons hired for that purpose under the oversight and supervision of the chairperson and the other members of the Commission. In line with this court's decision in Raila Amolo Odinga versus another versus IEBC and 2 others, as reported in 2017 Kenya Law Report, popularly known as Raila 2017, and the Court of Appeal decision in IEBC versus Maina Kiai, we also find that the chairperson cannot arrogate to himself the power to verify and tally the results of a presidential election to the exclusion of other members of the Commission. Indeed, Article 138(10) of the Constitution, although the power to declare the result of a presidential election after verification and tallying is vested in the chairperson, he does so only as a delegate of the Commission. Consequently, to the extent that Regulation 87(3) of the Elections General Regulation purport to vest the power of verifying and tallying presidential election results as received at the National Tallying Center solely on the chairperson to the exclusion of other members of the Commission, the same is contrary to and inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution. That said, we, however, take cognizance of the fact that the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th respondents, referred to as the 4 commissioners, actively participated in the verification and tallying exercise from the beginning up to and until just before the declaration of the result by the chairperson. They took turns announcing the results as verified and tallied, and were present and active during the actual verification and tallying at Bomas. An example is when one of them, Justice Nyangaya, stood on the podium to announce to the public results and also announced an adjustment that had been occasioned by errors of tabulation. The events of 15th August 2022, therefore, came as a surprise. As the public waited for the chairperson of IEBC to declare the final result, sporadic violence broke out at Bomas. The violence swiftly was contained by the security forces, but there was unexpected drama as 2 different factions of the Commission began to emerge. Kenyans found themselves watching an appalling split-screen scenario on their television sets. On one part of the screen was the chairperson readying himself to declare the results in accordance with Article 138(10) of the Constitution. On the other part of the screen were the 4 commissioners on the runs of the Serena Hotel, Nairobi, from where they announced that they would not own the results that were soon to be declared by their chairperson. The 4 commissioners informed the public of their rejection of the yet-to-be-announced results, terming them opaque due to the manner in which the chairperson had been conducting the verification and tallying exercise. In his affidavit dated 25th August 2022, Justice Nyangaya averred that the chairperson's actions during the tallying and verification exercise at Bomas made it difficult to ascertain the total number of votes cast and the actual number of votes attained by each candidate, so as to enable him authoritatively state the Commission and declared accurate results. All the petitioners have anchored their arguments for the nullification of the 9th August presidential election in Taharia on the walkout from the Bomas by the 4 commissioners. They contend that by rejecting IEBC's results on grounds of opaqueness of the verification and tallying process, they called into question the credibility of the entire election. They further submitted that being in the majority out of the 7-member commission, their view should prevail and the election should be nullified. It is the petitioner's argument, therefore, that a dysfunctional commission cannot deliver a credible election. We note that apart from their 11th hour denunciation of the verification and tallying process and their averments regarding the conduct of the chairperson, the 4 commissioners have not placed before this court any information or documents showing that the elections were either compromised or that the result would have substantially differed from that declared by the chairperson. Critically, they have not explained why they participated in a verification process when they knew that it was opaque up until the last minute. Indeed, at the Serena Hotel press briefing, the 4 commissioners acknowledged that Thus far, the entire election had been managed efficiently and credibly. The chairperson, on his part, did not make matters any better by maintaining a stoic silence, even as things appeared to be falling apart. All this, in our view, points to a serious malaise in the governance of an institution entrusted with one of the monumental tasks of midwifing our democracy, an institution that obviously needs far-reaching reforms, of which we shall say more in our detailed reasons. But are we to nullify an election on the basis of a last-minute boardroom rapture, the details of which remain scanty and contradictory between the chairperson of the Commission and some of its members? In the absence of any evidence of violation of the Constitution and our electoral laws, how can we upset an election in which the people are participating without hindrance, as they made their political choices pursuant to Article 38 of the Constitution? To do this would be tantamount to subjecting the sovereign will of the Kenyan people to the quorum antics of IEBC. This we cannot do. Clearly, the current dysfunctionality at the Commission impugns the state of its corporate governance, but does not affect the conduct of the 2022 election. In view of the foregoing, we are satisfied that, notwithstanding the divisions apparent between the chairperson and the 4 commissioners, IEBC carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of results in accordance with Article 138(3)(c) and 10 of the Constitution. Issue number 7, whether the declared President-elect attained 50+1 of all the votes cast in accordance with Article 138 of the Constitution. The first, second, and third petitioners averred that the first respondent did not garner 50%+1 of the total votes cast, and therefore did not meet the threshold provided by Article 138(4)(a) of the Constitution. They anchored their claims on the basis that in order to determine whether a candidate has attained 50%+1 of the votes cast, this ought to be calculated based on the total number of votes cast, excluding rejected votes. They argued that 50% of 14,353,165 votes, in their view, were the valid votes cast, which amounted to 7,176,582.77 votes. They therefore contended that by attaining 7.176141 votes, the first respondent did not meet the constitutional threshold to be declared president-elect. Supporting the claim that the first respondent did not meet the 50+1 constitutional threshold was the 6th petitioner. His contention was founded on the backdrop of a press briefing issued by the chairperson of IEBC after the official closure of voting on 9th August 2022. According to the 6th petitioner, the chairperson of IEBC announced that the voter turnout was 65.4% of the total number of registered votes based on the verification of the KIMS kits which were functional during the process of voting. In addition, the 6th petitioner argued that the voter turnout of 65.4% did not include some 238 polling stations where the KIMS kit and malfunctioned, necessitating use of the manual register. It was therefore urged that the minimum number of votes cast could not be less than 14,466,779. Additionally, that this number was bound to increase once the number of votes from the areas that used the manual register were included. The sixth petitioner further claimed that a summation of the minimum number of votes cast and unturned manual votes would represent the actual voter turnout. In challenging the declaration made by the chairperson of IEBC, the sixth petitioner found that the final tally, published in Form 34C, only accounted for 14,326,641 votes cast, including some 113,614 rejected ballots. The sixth petitioner contended that this tally did not factor in some 140,138 votes cast using the manual register. The sixth petitioner computed this number by subtracting 14,326,641 declared votes cast from 14,466,779 generated by the sixth petitioner as representing 65.4% of the voter turnout. Referring to the tallies in Form 34C, the sixth petitioner summed the number of votes cast for each candidate as follows. Raila Odinga, 6,942,193. William Ruto, 7,176,141. Wahiga Mwaura, 31,987. And George Wajakoya, 61,969, adding to a total of 14,213,027. He then added 140,138,000 arranged to be unturned votes, and this yielded a total of 14,353,165 total valid votes, which the sixth petitioner used to compute the percentages garnered by each candidate as follows. William Ruto, according to him, garnered 49.9%, Raila Odinga 48.3%, Wahiga 0.22%, and Wanjakoya 0.3%. It is on this basis that the sixth petitioner grounded the claim that none of the candidates met the constitutional threshold as set out in Article 138(4)(a). IEBC and its chairperson disputed the sixth petitioner's claim. They submitted that the declaration of results is based on the number of people identified as having voted on the KIMS kit and not the total persons on the voters' register as arranged. They contended that the final voter turnout, comprising of the voters who were identified through the KIMS kit and those who voted manually, was 64.76% and not 65.4% as arranged by the petitioners. They urged that the announcement error by the chairperson of IEBC on 10 August 2022 was immediately clarified during the same press briefing. And evidence of this correction was provided to this court in an affidavit of the first and second respondents in Presidential Election Petition number 7 of 2022. According to IEBC and the chairperson, 14,239,862 voters were identified using the KIMS kits, while 86,889 voters were identified using the printed voter register. Therefore, the total valid votes cast were 14,213,137, while the total number of rejected ballots were 113,614, constituting 14,326,751 total votes cast. They illustrated that the first respondent garnered 7.176,141 votes against 14,213,137 total valid votes cast, yielding a percentage of 50.49 to meet the requisite constitutional threshold for a candidate to be declared president-elect. In the upshot, the percentage attained by each candidate was as follows: Raila Odinga 48.84%, William Ruto 50.48%, Waiga Mwaure 0.22%, and John Wanjakoya 0.43%. INDC and its chairperson also submitted that the KIMS kits malfunctioned in 235 polling stations, necessitating the use of the printed voter register. In these polling stations, backup KIMS kits were later deployed for purposes of results transmission. The first respondent, in response to the question of 50+1 constitutional threshold, maintained that he attained the threshold under Article 138(4) of the Constitution as elaborated by the INDC and the chairperson. This court has considered the differing formulas and threshold arguments presented by various parties to this petition, while the first, second, and third petitioners raised pertinent questions connected to this issue. We shall address them together with those of the sixth petitioner, who has addressed and focused on the issue as specifically framed in detail. It must be restated that the case made by the sixth petitioners concerns a data-specific threshold as enunciated under Article 138(4) of the Constitution, that without attainment of which there can be no declaration. This data-specific threshold is what this court declared in John Arun Mwau and two others versus INDC and others. Petitions numbers 2 and 4 of 2017, consolidated, referred to as the ultimate yardstick for determining the winner in a presidential context. In Raila Odinga and 5 others versus INDC, petition number 5, 3, and 4 of 2013, this court asserted that rejected ballot papers do not constitute a vote cast to be included in calculating the final tally in favor of a presidential candidate. We are not persuaded by amicus curiae's brief, that is Law Society, who attempted to persuade us to consider our position on this finding. We reiterate that rejected votes cannot be taken into account when calculating whether a presidential candidate attained 50% plus 1 of the votes cast in accordance with Article 138(4) of the Constitution. Similarly, in the same Raila 2013 case, the court further laid down the parameters of burden and standard of proof in electoral disputes. More specifically, the burden and standard of proof required in disputes challenging the outcome of a presidential election. And this is what the court said, I quote, in the case of data-specific electoral requirements such as those specified in Article 138(4) of the Constitution, for an outright win in the presidential election, the party bearing the legal burden of proof must discharge it beyond any reasonable doubt. The question that follows was whether the petitioners challenging the attainment of 50% plus 1 constitutional threshold and the computation by the sixth petitioner in general met the standard of proof settled by this court in Raila 2013 case. The premise of the sixth petitioner's percentage computation was a press briefing made by the chairperson of IEBC on 10th August 2022, when the evidential burden shifted to IEBC and its chairperson, as it does in election cases. They produced video evidence correcting the percentage voter turnout to read 64.6 at the time of the briefing. This percentage, however, did not include reports from all the KIMS kits and 86,889 voters who were identified manually using the printed register of voters. In our view, the assertion by the sixth petitioner that the percentage voter turnout was firstly predicated on the uncorrected percentage given by the chairperson of IEBC was negated by evidence adduced to prove the correction. Secondly, the sixth petitioner based his percentage of voter turnout on the total number of registered voters, while the chairperson of IEBC made reference in the press briefing to the number of registrars who were identified through the KIMS kits progressively. The sixth petitioner also asserted that rounding off of votes cast in a presidential election as a means of assessing the threshold under Article 138(4) of the Constitution kills and bars voters, which is illegal and unconstitutional. We have deliberated on this proposition and found that it is not mathematically sound and that the rounding off done by IEBC and its chairperson was correct. Consequently, we find that the petitioners did not provide a watertight case to warrant the setting aside of the results of the presidential election on the basis of not having met the threshold provided under Article